You know that feeling of emptiness that arises when something you've been waiting for so fervently just doesn't happen? When your plans, dreams, or goals seem to slip through your fingers, like sand. That's disappointment, something we all experience, often quietly. But why do we get so frustrated when things don't go as planned? Are we placing too many expectations on what is out of our control? In this video, we will reflect on the disappointments and expectations we have in life. Let's understand with a Stoic vision how to overcome these frustrations and, more importantly, how to learn and grow from them. All of us, at some point in our lives, have felt the bitter taste of disappointment. That almost physical feeling of something we were waiting for so sure, but that, for some reason, didn't happen as planned. What we often forget is that disappointment doesn't come out of nowhere. It is born from the expectations we create. Expectations about ourselves, about others, and about the world around us. Disappointment can be described as that painful disconnect between what we desire and what actually happens. Think for a moment about the small everyday frustrations, when someone doesn't respond to our message as quickly as we hoped, when a project at work doesn't get the recognition we think it deserves, or when that dream trip ends up being marked by unforeseen events. These situations, as simple as they may seem, are direct expressions of how disappointment seeps into our lives. But beyond these small frustrations, there are the great disappointments that mark deeply. That promotion that didn't come, a relationship that ended unexpectedly, or even a life goal that seemed unattainable. These experiences leave emotional scars, often difficult to heal, and directly affect our self-esteem, our confidence, and the way we see the future. Expectations are like lenses through which we see reality. When we create expectations, whether about ourselves, people, or circumstances, we are actually projecting an idealized scenario. And when reality does not correspond to this ideal, disappointment is inevitable. It is important to realize that these expectations are often exaggerated or unrealistic. For example, expecting everyone around us to act on our values and beliefs is a sure recipe for frustration. Similarly, when we set ourselves rigid, perfectionist goals, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Not that dreaming or planning is a mistake, on the contrary, the problem lies in how we deal with the contrast between what we dream and what we actually live. There is a truth that few of us easily accept: we have no control over everything. Life is unpredictable, and the path is rarely straight. Accepting this reality may seem uncomfortable at first glance, but it is the first step in reducing the impact of disappointment on our lives. The expectations we carry with us do not appear out of nowhere. They are deeply influenced by our past experiences, the way we were raised, and what society teaches us to value. From an early age, we learn what is expected of us, whether it's the pressure to succeed academically, a good job, or even follow a traditional life path. How many times have you found yourself thinking, "I should be farther away, I should have achieved more"? This sense of duty is not simply born of a personal desire. It is often shaped by our family, the culture we live in, and the way we compare ourselves to others. A common example is in family expectations. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where success was measured by material achievement or social status. Or who knows, your family projected dreams and goals that were not exactly yours. When these scenarios do not come true, frustration comes strongly, not only because you did not achieve your goals, but because you felt that you disappointed those around you. This emotional load can be overwhelming. One of the biggest pitfalls we face when dealing with our expectations is the difficulty of separating what is realistic from what is unrealistic. It's not always easy to recognize when we're expecting too much from a situation or from ourselves. And sometimes, that's when the disappointment becomes more intense. Let's think together. What did you expect from your career, your relationships, your personal life? Now reflect. Are these expectations based on your own capabilities and the context in which you live, or are they based on an ideal that is almost impossible to achieve? We often confuse goals with unattainable ideals. We want the best result, the best performance, the best version of ourselves, without considering that we are human, fallible, and that life, with its uncertainties, does not always follow the perfect script we imagine. When we set the bar too high, the slightest deviation from the plan can bring us down emotionally. Now, let's enter even deeper territory, our personal beliefs. These often unconscious beliefs play a central role in how we shape our expectations. A limiting belief is one that, instead of pushing us, stops us, makes us believe that we are not capable or deserving of something. For example, someone who grew up hearing phrases like "you'll never be good enough" or "this kind of success isn't for people like you" may develop a distorted view of what is possible to achieve. Even if this person consciously wants to achieve great things, his mind, influenced by these limiting beliefs, can sabotage his expectations, generating a constant cycle of frustration and self-sabotage. The good news is that we can identify and challenge these beliefs. Ask yourself, where does this expectation come from? Is it rooted in a belief that limits me or in something that I really desire and can achieve? By questioning our beliefs, we take the first step toward adjusting our expectations in a healthier way. So, now that we understand where expectations come from and how they shape our view of the world, we need to address a crucial question: what happens when those expectations aren't met? What is the path we take emotionally when reality clashes with our dreams? This is the cycle of disappointment, and all of us, in one way or another, have been through it. Imagine this: you start to create an expectation. It could be something small, like expecting a message from someone special, or something big, like believing that your career is about to take off. Initially, you feel excited. The anticipation that things will work out drives you, fills your days with energy and hope. But then, reality arrives. And most of the time, it's not as rosy as our mind has projected. What should happen doesn't happen, or happens in a completely different way than expected. This is the first impact of disappointment, a shock that deeply affects our emotions. The feeling of emptiness takes over. What many do not realize is that, after this first blow, we enter a cycle. Initial frustration can quickly turn into anxiety, as we begin to ask ourselves, "What did I do wrong?" or "Why does this always happen to me?" This type of thinking generates self-criticism, one of the biggest enemies of our self-esteem. Self-criticism makes us believe that we are solely responsible for failure, ignoring all the external variables that also play an important role. Over time, if we don't deal with this frustration, it can turn into sadness or even a loss of motivation. Have you ever felt so disappointed with something that you just gave up trying again? This is more common than we imagine. The cycle of disappointment, when not broken, can become a downward spiral, where each new failure seems to validate that initial feeling that nothing works out for me. To better understand how this cycle manifests itself, let's explore some common examples of disappointment that most people have experienced. Relationships, perhaps one of the most fertile fields for disappointment. Imagine falling deeply in love with someone and expecting that person to respond in the same way, but they don't. Or enter a relationship believing that it will be the solution to all your emotional problems, only to discover that no relationship can bear this weight. Disappointment in relationships can lead to deep heartaches and often makes us doubt the possibility of finding happiness with someone else. The work environment is another stage of great expectations and, consequently, great frustrations. Think about the time you gave your best on a project, hoping for recognition or a promotion, but the return wasn't what you expected. The feeling that all your effort was in vain can be devastating and, if recurrent, makes you lose the motivation to continue investing in your career. Personal goals. How many times have you set goals for yourself, whether it's losing weight, starting a new hobby, or achieving financial stability, and for some reason you haven't been able to achieve them? When this happens, we tend to feel defeated, as if failure were an inherent characteristic of ours, which only feeds the cycle of self-criticism and demotivation. Each of these examples illustrates how disappointment seeps into different areas of our lives, and if not managed properly, it can have a lasting emotional impact. Tell me, which of these disappointments has happened to you and how did you deal with it? Now that we understand how the cycle of disappointment forms and the profound impacts it can have on our lives, it's time to talk about something even more important: how to deal with this feeling constructively. Because, after all, disappointment is inevitable, but how we respond to it can transform our lives for the better. This is where we need to shift the focus. Instead of trying to avoid disappointment at all costs, we need to learn to accept it and, more importantly, grow from it. The truth is simple, but profound: disappointment is part of our life experience. Whether we like it or not, we will all come across times when reality does not align with our expectations. And as painful as it is, the way we face these moments can make all the difference. But how, in practice, can we deal with disappointment in a healthy way? One of the first and most powerful strategies for dealing with disappointment is to accept that it is inevitable. This may seem discouraging at first glance, but it's actually incredibly liberating. When we accept that failure, frustration, and disappointment are natural parts of life, we stop resisting them so much. And with that, we allow ourselves to feel disappointment without being consumed by it. A great example comes from Stoic philosophy, which teaches us to accept what we cannot control. The philosopher Epictetus once said, "It is not events that disturb us, but rather the opinion we have of them." This means that the impact of disappointment is not so much in what happens, but in how we interpret what happened. When we understand that life doesn't always follow the script we write, we begin to welcome the unexpected with more serenity. But how to apply this on a daily basis? The next time something doesn't go as you planned, stop and breathe. Ask yourself, could I have controlled this? If the answer is no, allow yourself to accept the result. Recognizing that some things are beyond our control is a powerful step toward easing the emotional burden. In addition to acceptance, resilience is an essential skill for dealing with disappointment. Resilience does not mean being immune to pain or frustration, but rather having the ability to bounce back and adapt, even when things go wrong. A simple but effective technique for developing resilience is the practice of cognitive restructuring. Instead of focusing on what went wrong, try to change the perspective. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this situation, or how can it make me stronger? Turning disappointment into an opportunity for growth is one of the most effective ways to overcome frustration. Another aspect of resilience is the ability to adapt. Sometimes, when something doesn't work out, we insist on the same path, expecting different results. However, true resilience lies in recognizing when it's time to adjust course. If a door closes, it is necessary to look at other opportunities that may be opening. Many of the greatest achievements in life come from times when we need to recalculate the route. Think of the story of Thomas Edison. He failed thousands of times before inventing the electric light bulb. When asked about his failures, he replied, "I didn't fail. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work." This adaptation mindset is the key to turning disappointment into future success. Now that we've discussed the importance of accepting disappointment and how to deal with it through resilience and self-compassion, it's time to take it a step further. Let's talk about how to reset our expectations, so that we can not only avoid unnecessary frustrations but also find peace and contentment in life's circumstances. This is the moment when we have more control over what we expect, and, more importantly, how we react to what is presented to us. The truth is that much of our emotional suffering comes from the expectations we create. Unrealistic expectations can turn into a kind of mental trap, making us expect life to follow a script that often has no connection with reality. By learning to set healthy expectations, we free ourselves from this trap and make room for greater emotional balance. One of the most effective ways to avoid frustration is to learn to adjust our expectations. This does not mean stopping dreaming or being pessimistic, but rather being more realistic about what we can control and what is out of our reach. Here are some simple but powerful practices to get you started. Break down your goals into smaller steps. Instead of waiting for an overnight transformation, set smaller, achievable goals. This helps maintain motivation and reduces the chance of major frustrations along the way. Review your expectations often. Life is dynamic, full of unforeseen events. What made sense to you 6 months ago may no longer make sense today. Allow yourself to adjust your expectations as new information or situations arise. Be aware of your limitations and external limitations. It's easy to forget that not everything depends on us. For example, even if you try your hardest at work, you don't have complete control over the decision to get promoted. Maintaining this awareness helps you avoid unrealistic expectations. Also, consider whether your expectations are coming from a genuine desire or external pressure, whether from society, family, or even social media. Often, we are trying to achieve something that doesn't even make sense for our life, but that we have been led to believe is important. If there's one thing life always reminds us of, it's that things rarely go exactly as we planned. And this is where flexibility comes in. Being flexible in the face of unexpected changes is an essential skill for navigating life's ups and downs with more serenity. Flexibility isn't about giving up on your dreams or giving up easily. Rather, it's about learning to adapt when the path changes. It's like adjusting the sails of a boat when the wind changes direction. The destination is still the same, but the course may need adjustment. A great example of this is when we face challenges at work or in our personal lives. Maybe you planned a career in a specific field, but circumstances led you in another direction. Rather than dwelling on frustration, flexibility allows you to see it as an opportunity for growth in another field. Now that we've explored how to reset our expectations, we've come to a fundamental point: how to turn disappointment into learning. All of us, at some point, have come across situations that don't go as planned, and the big question is, what do we do with it? Do we let frustration get us down, or do we seek to understand what we can learn from these experiences? This is exactly where disappointment can become our greatest teacher. It shows us our vulnerabilities, teaches us to be more resilient, and most of all, helps us grow. Disappointment hurts, that is undeniable. But if we stop to reflect, we realize that life's greatest lessons often come from these moments of pain. Imagine a sculptor carving a piece of marble. Marble, when shaped, suffers cuts and blows that seem aggressive, but in the end, it becomes a work of art. Disappointment acts in a similar way in our lives. Every blow, every failure, every frustration sculpts our character. When we look at disappointment from this perspective, it is no longer something to be avoided and becomes an opportunity for growth. After all, if everything were easy and predictable, how could we learn to deal with the challenges that inevitably arise? One of the first steps to turning disappointment into learning is to change our mindset. Instead of asking ourselves, "Why did this happen to me?" we should ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" It seems like a small change in perspective, but it makes all the difference. Every time we face a situation that doesn't go as planned, we have a chance to reflect on how we can improve. It may be an opportunity to review our plans, strengthen our skills, or even adjust our expectations. Learning is present in every mistake, in every situation that does not develop as we imagine. Think, for example, about how many times you've been disappointed in some aspect of your life, whether it's at work, in a relationship, or in a personal goal. Now, look back and realize, what did you learn from each of these moments? You probably became stronger, wiser, and better prepared to deal with the difficulties that came later. There are countless stories of people who have faced great disappointments and instead of giving up, have turned those moments into fuel to achieve something greater. Think of Steve Jobs, who was fired from the very company he founded, Apple. At that moment, the disappointment was gigantic. He could have given up, but instead, he used that failure as an opportunity to create new companies and new ideas, which eventually brought him back to Apple, and the rest is history. The most interesting thing about disappointment is that, over time, it strengthens our character. Facing difficult times teaches us to be more patient, to tolerate uncertainty, and to trust in our ability to overcome. Each time we fall and get up, we develop an inner resilience that prepares us for even greater challenges. At the end of the day, disappointment is an intrinsic part of the human journey. All of us, at some point, will face frustrations, falls, and closed doors. But instead of allowing it to paralyze us, we can see these experiences as opportunities for learning and growth. Every disappointment contains a valuable lesson, just be willing to listen to it. And remember, success is not the absence of failures, but the ability to learn from them. May we increasingly see disappointment as a powerful tool to make us stronger and wiser. If you like this content and feel that it brought you a new perspective on disappointment, I'm sure that my other videos can also help you continue this journey of self-knowledge and personal growth. Each video is designed to bring you deep reflections and practical strategies to deal with life's challenges. I'll wait for you in the next video.